the people who were undertaking these attacks were the Houthis, very specifically, and that it was their hardware that we were launching these strikes on. It's there to degrade their ability to attack the shipping. So it's a very specific military action, and I think it shouldn't be characterized by trying to link it into the broader situation.
I mean, the point I'm trying to make is however much we might decry it, it appears that at the moment, the West, in inverted commas, is losing in this asymmetrical warfare with people prepared to take or make acts of terrorism.
Well, I certainly don't agree with that interpretation. I think it's certainly true that they were, if you like, having put it in inverted commas, success in the sense that they were able to have around 26 attacks going unanswered, other than obviously defensively in terms of, in fact, very effectively UK and US ships, naval ships, bringing down drones, intercepting missiles and so on.
Now, with the Defence Minister James Cartlidge, Conservative MP, of course. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good morning.
How do you see this situation with the Houthis developing?
So I think the first thing to say is that the strikes recently undertaken by the Royal Air Force in conjunction with the US were a very specific, targeted, proportionate set of strikes, justified, we feel, in international law, ultimately as an act of self-defense, because in addition to attacks, indiscriminate attacks on shipping, international shipping in the Red Sea, the Houthis attacked HMS Diamond, a British naval ship. And so we reached the point where the Prime Minister concluded he had no choice but to act, hence undertaking this very specific and targeted mission.
Are they going to be effective, though, in stopping the attacks on Red Sea shipping, which are leading to people avoiding the Suez Canal? Because, as has been pointed out, the Saudis were at war with the Houthis in Yemen for many years, didn't stop them, and these look more like, however serious they are, token strikes. Well, why do you think they're going to stop these attacks on ships?
Well, I would characterise them as very specifically targeted. This was about degrading the ability of the Houthis to undertake the kind of attacks on shipping that we've seen since November. I think around 26 separate incidents of attacks on international shipping from many countries, culminating, of course, in an attack on our own naval vessel. I think the key thing is, we wouldn't rule out further action. There is no further action authorised at present. We continue to patrol in the Red Sea as part of Operation Prosperity Guardian alongside our allies, and it's very much a case of keeping a careful eye on the situation as it develops.
But, I mean, my point is, unless shipping can resume going through the Suez Canal, it's going to be fairly pointless demonstration of force, isn't it?
Well, I think we have to ask ourselves what would have happened if we hadn't acted. It was already the case that the action by the Houthis was having a huge impact, as you described. I think, as my colleague James Heapy said recently when interviewed, we've become familiar with this footage of the green ants, as he called them, which is the sort of the graphic of all the shipping, which was at one point all going through the Red Sea, or most of it as normal, and now so much of it diverted, as you rightly say, around the Cape of Good Hope, with all that implies, and it's entirely understandable given these attacks. The point is, if we hadn't acted, they would have continued, and we would have been sending a message to the Houthis that it's okay for them to act with impunity. Whereas the Prime Minister came to the conclusion we couldn't allow that to happen. They've attacked UK naval ships, international maritime shipping, so we had to act. We've done so, but just to be clear, in a very proportionate and targeted way.
Of course, there are those who argue, and it includes supporters of or sympathisers with the Palestinians, that the easiest way for the West to stop these attacks going on would be actually to put pressure on Israel to stop their military offensive, which has so far claimed many thousands of lives.
Well, I understand that there will be those who want to try and bring these subjects together. Of course, the Houthis will put their spin on things.
I mean, the problem is they are connected. I mean, I appreciate why you want to see this as a separate matter, but the people who are doing it and causing this problem are making that connection. So you can't just dismiss it.
Adam, if I may, the people who were undertaking these attacks were the Houthis, very specifically, and that it was their hardware that we were launching these strikes on. It's there to degrade their ability to attack the shipping. So it's a very specific military action, and I think it shouldn't be characterised by trying to link it into the broader situation.
I mean, the point I'm trying to make is however much we might decry it, it appears that at the moment, the West, in inverted commas, is losing in this asymmetrical warfare with people prepared to take or make acts of terrorism.
Well, I certainly don't agree with that interpretation. I think it's certainly true that they were, if you like, having put it in inverted commas, success in the sense that they were able to have around 26 attacks going unanswered, other than obviously defensively in terms of, in fact, very effectively UK and US ships, naval ships bringing down drones, intercepting missiles and so on. But we therefore felt we had to take action, not least because they had hit a UK naval ship. And so we've undertaken this very specific targeted exercise, which has resulted in attacks on the hardware used by the Houthis to attack shipping. And I appreciate, as you said, I'm aware others will try to draw this into the bigger picture. We see it as very focused, very targeted, and we should stress justified under international law because of the right to self-defense.
And when does this end? Does this end when the task force, the American led task force of which Britain is a member, actually says to international shipping, okay, it's safe now, chaps? I mean, that really has to be the purpose of it, doesn't it?
Well, obviously, the aim of this was to degrade the hardware used by the Houthis to attack shipping. It also sends a very powerful signal that there are consequences for carrying out those attacks. Now, as to your point, what happens next? Of course, we do continue to patrol in the Red Sea. Operation Prosperity Guardian is ongoing. Obviously, we want to try and provide reassurance to international shipping, who will be themselves looking to see what happens next. Once we've undertaken these limited targeted strikes, we're now working with our allies to keep a very careful eye on how this develops.
Why has the UK still got diplomatic relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran, and why has it not prescribed the Revolutionary Guard as a banned organisation?
Well, I think you'll appreciate that these are primarily issues for other departments. Prescription is the Home Office, diplomacy is the Foreign Office, but obviously we work closely together. And I think that these matters no doubt will be raised in the coming days. There will be a very lengthy and detailed statement, I'm sure, by the Prime Minister tomorrow, where he'll receive a range of questions from MPs. And I suspect these matters will be raised and they'll be looked at in the round. From a Ministry of Defence point of view, as you can appreciate, we're very focused on what was a targeted military operation, which was undertaken, as you described at the start of the.
Sorry, just to confirm that, you're saying the Prime Minister is going to make the statement, because there are some reports it'll be the Defence Secretary, Mr. Shapps.
As I understand, there'll be a statement by the Prime Minister. These things are confirmed in the morning of the day of the statement, and so we'll wait and see. But obviously, it's our intent to brief the House in detail, enable MPs to ask questions following the action that was undertaken.
Yeah, thank you for that. Is there any embarrassment in the Ministry of Defence that the Americans appear to think that the Ministry of Defence has been rather leaky about the military action that was taken over the last few days, with comments like "watch this space" coming from the Defence Secretary? Have you offered any apology to the Americans?
On the contrary, I think the key thing is, first of all, we work incredibly closely with the US, and we've undertaken this action jointly with them. I think what the Secretary of State was doing was underlining, as we have done across government, Foreign Office, Prime Minister, that we were warning the Houthis repeatedly that they had to desist from these actions or there would be consequences. It's the right thing to do. We act under the rule of law, so we gave warning, we gave due warning, and then we acted when they didn't desist and when ultimately they attacked our own naval vessel. And so we're exercising our right to self-defense. So that was the point about the message, sending that clear signal to the Houthis they should desist. They now have a further sense of that message, because we have now acted. We've undertaken these targeted proportionate strikes, which were aimed to degrade their ability to wage further attacks in the Red Sea.
Mr. Cartlidge, obviously this week is a big week in terms of the Rwanda bill for the government. It comes back to full committee stage. There are a number of amendments down on that bill. What is the government's message to those on the right wing of the party who say they will vote it down if the government doesn't accept the changes they would like to see?
My message is, look, I mean, and obviously we had these sorts of discussions before second reading when actually there was a very comfortable majority. Of course, as a government, we'll engage with all colleagues. I see them as conservative colleagues. You know, this thing about different wings is, in my view, overplayed. But of course, there are strong views on this subject. I think the key and crucial point is we have a plan as a government to deal with this huge issue of small boats. We've seen only today the tragic consequences, terribly tragic consequences of what is happening today with people being trafficked by these terrible people smugglers. So we have to act. And we've already seen the plan working with small boat crossings down by a third last year. That's a significant drop, but we want to go much further. That's why we've brought forward what is, by any measure, a very robust piece of legislation. Of course, we'll engage with colleagues, but I hope we now put this through the House, get it all the way to royal assent so that we can start putting people on those planes and sending that powerful deterrent, which I think has the best chance of stopping the crossings from happening in the first place, so that we avoid precisely the kind of tragedy we've seen today.
But it's not working though, is it? Because people are still coming.
Well, I was very clear. The plan is working in the sense that we've seen a reduction of a third in crossings. That's very significant, but we know we have more to do. And in order to maximise the effect in bringing down crossings, we need to have the most robust possible piece of legislation, subject to what is compatible with our legal obligations. We believe we have that. We believe that this is an effective way in law that we can finally get people on those planes to Rwanda and send that powerful message of deterrent, because that's our plan. Our plan is to make further progress on stopping the boats, whereas it has to be said, our political opponents who have opposed every measure so far have no plan and would take us right back to square one.
I think I'm right in saying you're Minister responsible for defence procurement. What is the extent of the UK's defence cooperation with Israel?
Well, in terms of Israel, there is a relatively, I would say, in terms of the scheme of our overall defence exports, relatively small amount to Israel. We also buy equipment from Israel. They're a long-standing international partner of the United Kingdom. But I think that, again, as happened on our discussion on the Red Sea, we shouldn't be conflating that with what is going on at the moment. Israel has acted in self-defence after these horrific terrorist attacks, and our focus has been on very effective diplomatic engagement and, of course, supporting the humanitarian effort, because we are clear that whilst they have a right to self-defence, we also need to be supporting that humanitarian effort in the region, increasing the number of lorries getting through so that more aid gets to people in Gaza.
So no question of reviewing that?
I think if you're talking specifically, for example, about defence exports, well, I have had both written and oral questions. We have, as a department, had oral questions on this subject. That is something we do keep under review. It's very much a watching brief. But I think the crucial focus here as a government is on humanitarian aid, recognising Israel's right to defence, to self-defence after those horrific attacks in October. And our focus is on, we've put significant finance in place in relation to aid, but we want to see the number of lorries getting through increasing, as the Foreign Secretary said earlier. And that's very much where our focus is.
I mean, the problem I'm trying to get to is that when these raids against the Houthis took place, the UK government cited that the UN Security Council had voted in support of that. Yet when it comes to action to try and get Israel to curb its behaviour, the UK government seems to feel that it's right to ignore what the United Nations says. And this, I think, is why, rightly or wrongly, many people are out on the streets demonstrating in this country, for example.
Well, hold on. I would just to be clear, what we were citing is the UN Charter, Article 51, which is the right to self-defence. It was a UK naval ship that was attacked by the Houthis. I mean, does anyone imagine that we should sit back and allow our naval ships to be attacked in this way?
No,
of
but
course
you've also cited the vote in the Security Council.
Well, I think exactly, and I think there is a wide consensus on this. And I appreciate that there are those out there, international voices, who want to try and conflate the issues in Israel-Gaza with what's happening in the Red Sea. That's not our position. We see what we did in the Red Sea as very specific, a response, of course, to the harassment of vessels, maritime vessels, by the Houthis, but of course a direct attack on our own Royal Naval vessels.
So you're seriously saying there's no sort of organization which can be traced back to Tehran, and that these attacks by the Houthis would have taken place if there hadn't have been the assault on Gaza by Israel?
Well, I think that the Secretary of State's been talking about Iran's role and highlighting the fact that it nurtures what these organizations, which we call proxies, precisely because of their relationship. That was what that word implies with Iran, supporting them. And obviously, we think that they are seeing the results of doing that, and it's terribly damaging. And we've had to address that through this targeted, proportionate military action. But I do think we shouldn't be conflating these matters. In relation to Israel Gaza, our focus is on supporting the humanitarian effort, engaging closely with partners in the region. There's a huge amount of diplomatic activity, whilst recognizing very strongly the right of the Israelis to defend themselves. And then separately, and we look at this separately, there's a very specific military action in the Red Sea as a direct result of unacceptable attacks on international shipping and, of course, on our own naval vessel.
Defence Minister James Cartlidge, thank you for joining us, and we'll